Okay, welcome back, everyone. This is Basic Plant Science lecture. This is lecture number 3, which means after this class is done today, we'll be about 40% done with the course material for the summer. So yeah, summers move mad quick. So don't fall asleep at the wheel, guys. Stay with it. Stay with it. Goes by woo in a flash. Let me share my screen so we can jump right into it. Okay. So let me pull this up to the top. Feeling a little tired today, a little tired. I'm gonna try to push through it. I'm drinking my tea as usual, right? Tea is nice. Okay. So welcome back. This is Basic Plant Science lecture number 3. This is where you guys can reach me if you ever need to. Last time we went through the very exciting world of tissues and stems, right? Boy, just so exciting. Obviously, that's one of my favorite topics. But we did talk a little bit about the plant body and the different types of growth, right? Primary and secondary, I probably said 1,000 times during that lecture. We learned about meristems, right? Which are parts of a plant that the cells can divide and create new tissues. We learned what some of those tissues were. And then we compared dicot stems and monocot stems and looked at variations and adaptations of the stem. Today, so if you haven't already, you should go back and watch that lecture before watching today's lecture, because there's stuff in today's lecture that it'll be helpful if you have seen the second one first. Today, we're going to talk about the leaf and the root. We're going to talk about functions of both of those, forms of both of those. So the external forms of leaves and roots and the internal form. We will compare a dicot leaf and a monocot leaf. We will also compare a dicot root and monocot root, although that's not showing here, but we will do that too. Then we'll talk about root systems, growth of those systems and the regions of those systems. And lastly, some variation and adaptation of the leaf and the root. Not necessarily in this order, but these are all the things we're going to hit today. Oh, leaves. Hopefully most of you out there know what a leaf is or have seen a leaf, right? I feel like, yes, you have. But if not, here's some leaves. These are things called leaves. And leaves are such a great example of the diversity that plants bring to us, because leaves come in such a great variety of different shapes and colors and sizes. Here's just a few. This is just a few to give you an idea. These are all examples of a leaf, although sometimes here, I'm already annotating, watch out. Each of these is one leaf, so this is showing you several leaves, but same goes over here. But like this guy, this is just one leaf, believe it or not, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about that today. I should hold my annotating down. So yeah, lots of different shapes. Look at these are all different leaf shapes, right? Pretty cool. Look at all these are all leaves. All of these are leaves, and believe it or not, all of these are actually leaves from ferns, and there's lots and lots of ferns. So this isn't all of the ferns, but look at how much leaf diversity there is just in the ferns, just in one type of plant. So I said leaves come in a bunch of different shapes. Leaves also come in a great variety or a bunch of different sizes, right? So here is an example of a really, really small plant. This is from the duckweed family. Duckweed family is Lemnaceae. Ooh, there's an extra A in that, Lemnaceae. That's okay. Lemnaceae. Yeah, there's an extra A in there. You don't need to know it. But look at how small this plant is. So on the bottom, you have a hand. And at the tippy top of each of those fingers are a few plants from each of these, from some of these duckweed families. So those little green blobs at the top of those fingers are actually plants, believe it or not. If you don't believe me, look here on the top right, you have a bee, like a bumblebee, standing on a bunch of these. So this is a floating plant. This plant floats in water. And so here, this bee is actually able to walk on the water because it's walking on all of these little tiny plants that are floating there. So very, very teeny tiny plants. Teeny tiny plants with teeny tiny leaves, but then leaves can also be pretty ginormous. I've never been lucky enough to see a leaf this big. I hope someday I will. And if I do encounter it, I will definitely take a picture much like this. Let me know in the discussion. So on the lecture slides are posted, you guys can write in the thread there on Canvas. Let me know if you've ever seen a leaf this big. I would be interested to know, because and if so, where did you see it? Because I'm on the hunt for a leaf this big. But check this out, so big. Look at this one. Wow. So this is a type of water lily, believe it or not. And these water lily leaves are so big, this kid can just be on it. Yeah. So leaves come in a lot of different shapes. Leaves come in a lot of different sizes. Leaves come in a lot of different colors, usually green or variations of green, but other colors as well. Okay, so what does a leaf do? Why do plants have leaves? What functions do they serve? Well, the biggest, most important one is photosynthesis. We will talk a lot about photosynthesis and the different parts of it when we get to the plant physiology lecture, which is going to be in a few. But just to give you kind of an overview of what photosynthesis is, basically plants can take, let's see, what would be a good color to annotate on this slide? Purple. So this is a sunflower plant, right? And it's growing in dirt, and the sun is shining on it, right? Shining on the plant. And what plants are able to do, so the sunlight is shining on the leaves, and meanwhile, water, shown down here, is being absorbed by the roots, right? And so plants are able to take sunlight and use the energy from the sunlight and water to split up carbon dioxide and basically turn it into sugars. So just as an overview today, what happens during photosynthesis? The plant absorbs carbon dioxide from the air. The plant absorbs water from the soil. And then with the power of the sunlight is able to do chemical reactions, boom, 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 chemical reactions. That's my noise for chemical reactions, boom, 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 I guess. But sunlight, energy, water, carbon dioxide, boom, 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 and you get sugars, which the plant uses as food. And when we eat the plant, we're consuming this sugar too. We use it as food as well. And as a waste product of photosynthesis, oxygen is released. Thanks, plants, because we happen to breathe oxygen, so that's kind of important. So thanks, plants. They remove carbon dioxide from the air and they release oxygen. So thanks, plants. That's very nice. I don't know if you've ever, I used to live in a very kind of industrial part of Brooklyn, and the air wasn't so great. And so every time I would go into like a forest or a green space, I would always, it's so noticeable. Fresh, nice oxygen, right? Okay. So photosynthesis is one thing that leaves do. Another thing that leaves do is something called transpiration. Transpiration involves water. And so again, we will talk about this in more detail when we get to the plant physiology lab. But just to give you an idea, right? So again, water is coming in at the roots. And water has this amazing ability where water molecules kind of want to be next to one another because of their chemical bonds, which you don't need to know the details about, but just suffice it to say that water molecules are kind of like magnets to each other. So if you have a few of them together, they want to clump together. Here's a way you can do this. So if you have a countertop at your place and you put a few drops of water, notice that it won't, if you just put a few drops on the countertop, the drops will stay together, right? They'll stay together. They're not going to like flatten out and go away from each other. They want to stay together because, like I said, the molecules, they're kind of almost like magnetic to one another. And that's useful in this plant because what happens is as water goes in to the roots, it kind of pulls other water molecules along with it so that they make kind of this long chain. See, water molecules pull each other. And so as they move up the stem in the what tissue moves water in plants? This is, maybe pause right here and think about it, right? Because we talked about it a lot last time. Xylem tissue, right? So as the water moves up the stem through the xylem tissue, it's going to be dragging water molecules along with it. The only thing is that eventually there's this thing called gravity, like, apple, right? Falling off the head, that kind of thing, gravity. There's this thing called gravity. And so even though the water molecules are magnetic and they kind of want, they're not really magnetic, but even though they kind of want to be next to each other and they pull each other, eventually the forces of gravity, here, this will be gravity. Eventually the forces of gravity are going to be so strong that the water molecules aren't going to be able to just keep going up the plant. Hence this thing called transpiration. So what happens is, and we'll learn about it in more detail later, but there's these holes, well, there's these structures on the underside of leaves. And part of those structures are holes. And what happens is when those holes are open, water vapor can escape out of the leaves. And what that does is it allows the water to continue up the stem. Look here, it's getting out of the leaf. It's almost acting like a vacuum, kind of sucking the water. So as the water is released out of these holes in the leaf, pulls the water molecules through the xylem and is able to combat the force of gravity. Super cool. So that process of water leaving the leaves is called transpiration. If you don't believe me that this is something that happens, if you have a plant at home, put a little plastic bag over it for a few hours, maybe overnight, or maybe for a day. Put a plastic bag over it, like a Ziploc bag, and watch what happens. Over time, there will be little water droplets that will form, and that's from the vapor leaving the leaves. Transpiration. Here is just another way to look at that. Oh, look, see, this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying, guys. Look, try this. Try this. You cover an entire leaf of a green plant, you will notice that the plastic bag will look foggy after a while. Try it. Try it at home. Don't believe me? Try it at home. So yeah, that's due to this process called transpiration. Another way that sometimes the water can also just straight up evaporate from the soil as well. But that doesn't have anything to do with the plant. That just has to do with water. All right. About that. Next. Oh gosh. Next. Okay. The functions of the leaf, right? Functions of the leaf: photosynthesis and transpiration. Easy enough. All right. Let's talk about what leaves look like on the outside and the ways to talk about them. So we saw this representative plant last time. And when I showed you this last time, I pointed out the fact that there's a root system at the bottom and a shoot system above the dirt, correct, right? And so look here on the left, the shoot system is made up of stems, leaves, and flowers. Well, this is the leaf lecture, and so we're going to talk about the leaves of the shoot system. Yes. So here is a leaf. Here is a leaf that this is pointing to. And if you're looking at the leaf from the outside, the main parts of a leaf are something called a petiole and something called a blade or a lamina. Same, you can pick either one. Either one is fine, blade or lamina. Sometimes the book might say, I forget which one the book uses. It probably mentions both, honestly, probably mentions both, blade or lamina, same thing. So here's one leaf right here. I'll circle it here. This is one leaf. the thing that you hold, like if you were going to play with a leaf, I know that I know that's what you guys all do on your time off, right? You play with leaves. But if you were to like grab a leaf and hold it by the little stem thing, the little stem thing is the petiole. Petiole. So here, look, petiole. So on this leaf that I circled, I'll use a different color. On this leaf that I circled, the stem thing, that's the petiole right there. And then the flat green part, right here, is what is called either the blade or the lamina. Either word is fine, they mean the same thing. So that's the outside of a leaf. Leaves are part of the shoot system, right? So there, you might notice here on this other leaf here, look. Here's this petiole, right? Here's the blade or the lamina of the leaf. And you might notice this little kind of thing that's right, if this is the petiole of the leaf, the little thing's like kind of right next to it on the stem. And that thing is called an axillary bud. We said the word last time, but I didn't really talk about them. But axillary buds are going to be where branches occur, if branches do occur, ever. If branches do occur. Usually you won't have branching unless like this apical bud gets removed in some cases, but in other cases, branching will eventually happen. Like if you're a tree, for example. So that's why it says buds and axils of leaves produce branches. So this bud will eventually produce a branch. Okay. Boy, my PowerPoint doesn't want to, okay. So there's simple leaves and there are compound leaves. So first we're going to talk about simple leaf for simplicity's sake, right? We'll talk simple leaf. So I already told you petiole and blade. I already told you that I'll use blue. So here is petiole, right? This little stem you would hold if you were going to play with it. The flat green part, whoa, right? Don't drink tea and annotate. The flat green part is the blade or the lamina, right? Blade or lamina. And then so in the stem, in the petiole part, right? There's vascular tissue, xylem and phloem. And so that is going to extend into the leaf. The leaf needs vasculature. The leaf needs vascular system, right? Because the leaf is going to be getting water all the way from the roots. That can only come from the vascular system. And the leaf is going to be making sugars that it sends all the way down to the roots. And the only way it's going to get down there is through the vascular system. So the leaf has to have vascular system. If you're looking at a simple leaf, usually there's a midrib, which is the central vein of the vascular system in the leaf. And then there will be other veins kind of coming off of that mid vein. And there may even be some smaller ones in between those other veins. Stipules show up now and again. Stipules are basically a word that botanists use to describe weird green pokies. It's like there'll be stipules sometimes on other structures too, and it's like basically like a weird green pokey. We don't really know all the time what the stipules do. So oftentimes it's kind of like, what is that? It's like, oh, that's stipule. It's like weird green pokey thing. Okay, yeah, stipules. Don't worry about stipules too much. But the other stuff is important. Petiole, blade, and then the vascular system of the leaf, which is the midrib and the veins, right? And the veins. All right, that's a simple leaf. Compound leaf is another type of leaf in that it's way more complex than this, right? So in terms of the compound leaf, I'll do the one on the right because it's easier to see. This whole thing is one leaf. That whole thing is one leaf, right? This whole thing on the left is one leaf. You see how it's more complicated, right? So this is a compound leaf. On the compound leaf, you still have the same things in that, like, you still have a petiole, and the green part is still the blade or the lamina. One difference of a compound leaf, though, is that now if instead of a midrib, like, so before we had on the previous slide, we had a midrib, right? The central vein. Well, because we're a compound leaf now it's a little more complicated. So we don't call it a midrib anymore. We call it a rachis. So if you look here on the left, do you see this thing I'm trying to cover with the blue thing? You know, if this was a simple leaf, that would be the midrib. But because it's a compound leaf, we call it a rachis. So if we were to just build on what we're learning, right? Here is the petiole, right? Here is the blade or the lamina. Sorry, I'm horrible at drawing. And then here is the rachis. It's that thing that I drew here on the left. So the rachis is kind of like when the petiole like keeps going through the blade or the lamina, that's what the rachis is, like the midrib. Okay. Another thing that leaves have that we can see with our naked eye, usually to some extent, is trichomes. So we talked a little bit about trichomes last time. Yes, when we were talking about epidermis, talked a little bit about trichomes. Oh, I will say some of these are under a dissecting microscope. And for like this one up here and these here that I'm putting an orange box around, I took those pictures. That's my study species, Capsella bursifostoris. I took those pictures during my dissertation work, and you can see what's cool about that species is there's two types of trichomes on one leaf. There's these like star-shaped trichomes, and then there's these like spiky trichomes on one leaf. Look, here's one leaf, and if I do a circle, look, you see star-shaped ones and spiky ones. Yes, I took those. But there's other examples here. Sometimes trichomes can be different colors. Like here, this one has purple trichomes. Maybe some of you have bought an air plant before or seen air plants before, and they're really fuzzy. That's because they're covered in these hairs called trichomes. I actually knew a friend who bought one of these, and she brought it home, and she was like, man, I bought an air plant today, but gosh, when I got it home, I realized how dusty it was. And so I had to dust all the dust off. And I was like, no, that's its trichomes. It needs it to get water from the air. Yeah. I was like, you should have called me before you did that. Yeah, sometimes trichomes can be almost like little hooks shown down here. And sometimes they can have kind of stinging properties to them and actually hurt. And either way, the hooks or the stinging properties are to prevent insects from eating the leaves. So yeah, that's another thing that leaves have. Okay, so that was all the external, right, parts of a leaf. Now I'm going to talk about leaf division. And this is that simple versus compound leaf thing again. So here we go. This is a simple leaf. Simple leaf is like if you're playing with the leaf, right? There's only one thing above it, right? One thing above it. One structure above the petiole. So, right, here's our petiole. And there's only one thing above that petiole, right? Simple leaf. Remember, that's that midrib right there. So simple leaf is simple enough, right? That's simple enough. Compound leaves, there's different kinds. There's different kinds of compound leaves. There's different kinds of simple leaf too, but for this class, simple leaf is fine. Compound leaf has more than one thing above the petiole. So for example, look at this one on the left, right? Here's the petiole and there's 3 things above it. Here is the petiole and there's what, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 things above it, right? Etc. Here's the petiole on this one. Lots of stuff above it. So that's how we know those are compound leaves. There's different ways to describe the different types of compound leaves. This one is, we could say, palmately compound leaf, because basically the leaflets, that's what we call those little leaves there, leaflets, they all come from the same spot, kind of like how my fingers like come from one hand, right? So like each of these things is like going from one spot, like a hand, hence the palm part of the palmately compound. So there's palmately compound leaves, and there's pinnately compound leaves. So pinna means a feather. And so whoever named these compound leaves pinnately compound thought that they looked like a feather. And yes, I'll give them that. It looks like a feather. It's featherish, right? So fine. But you might be looking at these two things and you can notice that they're not exactly the same, right? Like here, this leaflet is one solid thing. Whereas over here, there's a whole bunch more going on, right? A whole bunch more going on. So we have ways to distinguish these two things. They're both pinnately compound. Both of these things are pinnately compound. But this one here only has one division. So we call it 1 times pinnately compound. 1 times pinnately compound. You can call these little things, each of those things, you can call it a leaflet. Leaflet is totally fine. Here, I'll write it here. Leaflet. Oy. You can call that thing a leaflet, which is kind of a way of saying like little leaf, right? Or you can call it a pinna. Either one is fine for this class. Either one is fine for this class. So 1 times pinnately compound. Whoops, no more chat box or no more text thing. Clear. Whereas this one is 2 times pinnately compound because there's 2 things going on. There's this, so I won't do it the same one over here, but like this whole thing is 1 division, and then on that thing is another level of division, right? Oops. So 2 levels of division. It's a pinnately compound leaf, so therefore we call it 2 times pinnately compound. And these terms pinna and pinnule we will encounter again when we get to the ferns later on in this course. But for today, don't worry about pinnule. We'll talk about pinnule once we get to the ferns. All right. Yeah. Sometimes you could have even more. You could have 3 times pinnately compound. You could have 10 times pinnately compound. It just depends on the species of plant that you're looking at. But the point is, it's still pinnately compound, and yeah, there's lots of things on it. Again, we'll talk about this more during the fern lecture. Okay, so I just taught you the names of a bunch of ways to discuss these leaves, right? So it's a little brain teaser for you. So here's a bunch of leaves here on this slide, right? First, when you look at these, I want you to think, what is the leaf shape, right? Like, first of all, you should think, are these simple leaves or compound leaves? That's the first thing you should be thinking, right? Well, most of them, it's pretty clear, right, that there's a lot of things above the petiole, right? Most of them, that's pretty clear. This one over here, it's kind of harder to see, but trust me, there's also lots of things. They're just thinner. Can't even draw that thin coming off of them. So yeah, so these are definitely compound leaves. And then we've learned about 2 different types of compound leaves. We learned about palmately compound, which looks like kind of like a palm, and pinnately compound, which looks kind of like a feather. And so what do these look more like? A feather. Yes, they look like a feather. So we know that these are pinnately compound. And then we learned that depending on how many divisions you have on a pinnately compound leaf, you can call it different things. And so maybe let's look at one that's easier. Like this one, it's easier to see what's going on. This looks like a single thing, 1 division. And so 1 times pinnately compound leaf. 1 times pinnately compound. So all of the leaves on this slide are actually 1 times pinnately compound. So this is how you should be thinking. Here you go. So that's that leaf that I circled, holding it to show you. Look, 1 division, right? It's compound leaf, it's pinnately shaped, right? Shaped like a feather, 1 time of division. Okay. Yeah, so that whole thing is a leaf. That whole thing in that box is a leaf. All right. Here you go. Here's another one. So, oh, it says it. Ah. But yeah, so 1 times pinnately compound here, 2 times pinnately compound here, right? Instead of a drawing, this is a real leaf. And so again, just to hit this home, this whole thing is a single leaf. It's a single leaf, right? Here's the petiole of the leaf. Here's the rachis of the leaf. And each of these things, this is a pinna or leaflet. And then each of these little things are even smaller leaflets, right? Pinule, which we'll talk about, they're in ferns. Okay. Leaf arrangement. Depending on what species you're talking about, the leaves are going to be on the stem in different ways of arrangement. And there's a whole part of botany that's about that, which is called phyllotaxy. Phyllotaxy means discussing how leaves are arranged, classification of how leaves are arranged. So phyllo, for example, phyll means leaf. And then taxy is like kind of Latin root meaning like classification. So it's like the classification of leaves is kind of how you can think of that. So here's one example of a leaf arrangement or phyllotaxy. This is opposite arrangement. So here the leaves on the stem are located directly opposite one another, like right next to one another, like this. And if you were to look at it in a real life plant, you can see it clearly, the leaves are opposite. So here's a leaf, right? This whole thing here is a leaf, but I'll just touch on it right there. And look, here's another leaf directly opposite it, right? Here, here. Down here in this maple, this example of leaves that are not green, these are red. Here's a leaf here, whoops. Here is a leaf here, and then directly opposite is another leaf, right? So that's opposite leaf arrangement or phyllotaxy. Some other species don't have opposite, they have alternate. So instead here, leaves are gonna alternate here, here, and the next one would be 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 here. Alternate leaf arrangement. If you're to look on that, oops, on a real plant, here you go. See, this leaf is here, and there is no leaf opposite it. The next one is on the other side, right? Alternates what side it's on. Down here, this whole thing is one leaf. It's a compound leaf. And look, it's coming out this way. There's no leaf opposite it. So this one is alternate as well. Alternates. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Then there's also a type of leaf arrangement called whorled. Not like the world. Whorled. Whorled means in a circle. Whorled means in a circle. So here, the leaves, sometimes whorled leaves will be like if there's a stem here, like sometimes whorled leaves will be all the way around the stem, almost like kind of a spiral. Other times the whorled leaves might go like, they'll be like opposite this way and then opposite this way and then opposite this way and then opposite this way. I think it'll be clearer when we look at these coming up here, right? So this one on the bottom is what I was saying is like, it's almost kind of like the leaves spiral all around the stem. So here's the stem and all these leaves are coming out like at the same spot on this stem. But it's not just two leaves, right? It's like many, many leaves right there. So we don't say opposite. We say that it's world, because world means in a circle, right? So you can think of it like, oops, like this kind of is a circle. Whereas this mint up here on the left, or in the middle rather, it does more what I was saying before, where it will be like, have two go this way and then two go that way, and then two go this way and then two go that way. So like here is the this way, and then here is the that way, and then here's the this way, and then like here is the that way. So yeah, world leaves. Okay, so opposite leaf arrangement, alternate leaf arrangement, and world. Those are the only three you have to know for the course. Next, we'll talk about leaf venation, which just means the veins in a leaf, veins in a leaf. So here you go. These are some simple leaves showing you some basic venation patterns, right? Patterns of leaf veins. So on the bottom here, showing you, look how here it says that these ones here, this apple and this Japanese maple, have veins that are that they are calling netted, right? On this slide it says netted, whereas this lily of the valley doesn't have that. Netted means it just kind of like, it's kind of like a net. So like kind of casts a wide way, and it's like a lot going on, right? Here's another way to think of like a net. These things I'm drawing on are the veins of these leaves, by the way. Right. This one doesn't have that. This one has veins that just go like this. And so on the bottom, you see actual leaves doing this, whereas the one on the left bottom is showing you net-like vein pattern, or net-like venation. The one on the right is showing you vein patterns that are similar to the lily of the valley, right? No net-like, just straight lines, just straight lines. So like they're harder to see, but there's a vein there, there's a vein there, there's a vein, whoa, there's a vein there. Here's the midrib in the middle, etc. Whereas this one, here's the midrib, and then the veins come off of that midrib, not like how it is on the right, right? Okay. So net-like on the left, parallel venation on the right, parallel venation on the right. So dicots usually have this net-like, or reticulate is another way you can say that, but net-like is fine, pattern of venation. So here's a bunch of different dicots, and they all have this net-like venation. Now you might be looking at these and say to me, well, Rebecca, this sure as heck looks like parallel venation to me. I get it, kind of does, right? Likewise, you could say like, well, this kind of looks like parallel venation to me, like that one you showed me on the previous. Yes, except, so with parallel venation, you literally just have straight lines of veins, and they don't really like interact with one another. So like on the ones I showed you that they kind of look parallel, here's that mid vein, and then the other ones are coming off of that mid vein. It's hard to draw that. That's not like this. That's just straight. Likewise here on the bottom, here's a mid vein. And yeah, sure, this one kind of, but then they're interacting. Look, there's all these little guys going in between, more like a net. So trust me when I say that everything on this slide here has a net-like or reticulate vein pattern, or leaf venation. Whereas here are the monocots that have this parallel type of venation pattern that I've been trying to say. So like, this is that grass from the very first slide where I started doing these crazy lines, right? Here's more. So you could see they're all parallel to one another, right? One, right? This one's a little sketchy. Don't even worry about that one. That one's a little A little extra going on in there. But these, you can't argue with me, right? These are parallel venation. And this is parallel venation. This, a little sketchy. Don't worry about that guy. All right, here you go. So if I showed you this and I said, is this from a monocot or a dicot, right? What kind of plant is this leaf from? Well, hopefully you can tell that we don't have net-like. Here she goes again with these lines. That we don't have net-like venation, we have, oh boy, straight lines. Yeah, straight. Yeah, trust me, those are straight lines. Parallel venation. So we know that this must be a monocot leaf, and it is, it's a grass. Whereas here, if I showed you this and asked you what kind of leaf, sorry, what kind of plant this came from, hopefully you can tell with your eyes, these are not parallel veins and they're net-like veins. And so you would tell me this is a monocot leaf vein, right? These are veins of a monocot leaf. Sorry, dicot leaf. This is monocot with parallel venation. This is dicot with the net-like venation, right? Dicots have net-like. Monocots have parallel. This is monocot. This is from a grass. Parallel. This is dicot. I don't remember what plant this is from, but this is dicot and it's net-like, right? Not parallel. Okay. That was a lot about leaf external stuff. Let me pause for a second to refresh my tea. And I guess I gotta stop sharing to pause. So I'll pause real quick to refresh my tea and I'll be right back. Okay, tea is refreshed. I challenge anyone to go sit in a room by yourself and talk for over an hour and try to not need to drink something. Okay. Let's share this again. It's like I need a laugh track or something, like you know those old Friends episodes, like ha ha ha. Like I need something. It's just I only got the babbling brook back here, but still. All right, so we left off with veins. Let's keep going. Yes, great. Wait, am I think I'm sharing the right thing. Yes. Yes, okay. So that was the external structure of leaf. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the internal structure of leaves. So this is a cross section through a leaf. And some of this stuff we actually, believe it or not, mentioned briefly last time when we were talking about tissues. And so let me see, what would be a good color to go with on this slide? I think blue. I think blue is good. All right, so for example, when we learned about tissues, we learned about three primary meristems, right? We learned about protoderm, which is a primary meristem, procambium, which is a primary meristem, and ground meristem, which is a primary meristem, all three of which are made by the apical meristem. And we learned last time that those three primary meristems make primary tissues. And so, for example, the protoderm, which is the primary meristem, makes the tissue epidermis, and it makes epidermis no matter where you are on the plant, whether you're on the leaf, the stem, or the root. And so here you go. We're looking at a leaf right now. And this topmost layer is epidermis. That's the upper epidermis of the leaf. Down here, and so just so you know, I was saying this is a cross section. Look, here's a leaf, and they cut it, and this is what we're looking at up here, just so you know. But yeah, so the upper layer of cells is the upper epidermis. Lower layer of cells is the lower epidermis. And you can see this kind of reddish stuff on top. That's that cuticle that I mentioned before. And there will also be a cuticle present on the lower epidermis. Let's see, so that covers the primary tissue that the protoderm makes. But what about the ground meristem? Well, in leaves, the ground meristem makes the ground tissue, which in leaves is mesophyll. So look, here's palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll. But basically all these cells right here, all those cells right there, those are the ground tissue. And all these down here too are also the ground tissue. So all that stuff is ground tissue, or mesophyll, which is what it's called in the leaf. And then lastly, the procambium, which is a meristem, makes the primary tissue xylem and phloem, primary xylem and phloem. And those are going to be located in the veins of the leaf, which I'm circling. Here we could see part of the insides of the vein, and this stuff on top is the xylem, and this stuff on the bottom is the phloem. So we actually covered a decent amount of this the last time. And there's a few other terms on this slide, but we will cover those as we move forward. So I'm not going to draw attention to them now. So look, here's what, so I said before, this red stuff is the cuticle, right? Cuticle helps prevent water loss, usually pretty waxy. So here's some leaves. These are ivy leaves. And you can see the ivy have this kind of glossy look to them. That's because of their cuticle. That's secreted by the epidermis. Oh. So in the beginning of this lecture, I talked to you guys a little bit about transpiration, right? Where water comes in at the roots, goes up through the stems, and then eventually goes to the leaves. And then the water is released, the water vapor is released through holes in the leaf. Well, those holes are part of a thing called a stomatal apparatus. And those holes are located on the bottom side of the leaf, or where the lower epidermis is. So if we go back here, remember I said this is the lower epidermis, and you see this thing here. That's one of those holes. That's one of those holes. Here's another one here. Just to get you oriented of like where they are on this leaf cross section. So here we're looking at a microscope slide of the lower epidermis, where these structures are found. And each of these structures are called a stomatal apparatus. So apparatus means an opening. I don't know if any of you do photography using like a real camera or a fancy digital camera that you can adjust manually. But like in photography, there's a thing called an aperture. It's that same root word. In photography, aperture refers to how open the lens is. So apparatus refers to that aperture kind of idea. It means like a structure that opens and closes, I guess. And stoma means hole in Latin. Stoma means hole. So this is a hole that can open and close, basically. If you're reading this in like Latin, it's like a hole that opens and closes. And here's what they look like. So here is one stomatal apparatus. Here is another stomatal apparatus. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more on this slide. And each stomatal apparatus, or hole that opens and closes, has parts. And the parts are a hole, right? Which is very easy to see kind of on this one. It's in the middle there. Here on this one on the top, the hole is right there. And then 2 guard cells. So here is one guard cell. Here is another guard cell. On this one, I drew a circle on earlier. There's one guard cell, another guard cell. And the guard cells are going to be the cells that are going to either swell up and close or not swell up and kind of fall back. So they're going to be opening and closing the hole or the stoma. Here is, so that was a real picture of an actual lower epidermis of a leaf. Here's a diagram of that. So on the left here, this is kind of like this here is what's kind of being shown on this, right? Same kind of orientation. You can see one, so here, look, right? Stoma means hole. So here's the hole in the middle. And then one guard cell. Here's the other guard cell here. And yeah, same thing here. Look, this has kind of been cut through, but here, this whole thing here is a guard cell. This whole thing here is a guard cell. And the whole is right here, right? Yeah. And so what'll happen is these guard cells will open and close to, these guard cells will either allow the hole or the stoma to be open or closed. When it's open, water vapor can escape. When it's closed, water vapor cannot escape. Yeah. And so one thing I should mention, remember before I said, you know, the water escaping at the leaves allows the water inside the plant to overcome the effects of gravity. And so, for example, like, let's say it's super hot out for a while and these structures are closed, right? So that water vapor can't escape. If that happens long enough, there won't be enough vacuum pull to get water to all the parts of the plant. So the plant could be really bad off if that's the case. So it's important that these open and close. Yes, so remember back here, I'm showing you the ground tissue of a leaf, right? All of this mesophyll. So the ground tissue is like this, all the structure inside except for the veins, right? But all the other stuff in there is mesophyll. So mesophyll is what this is the tissue layer in leaves that performs photosynthesis. So just to walk you through this diagram, I'll change colors to, I guess, purple, right? Here is a leaf. And now we're going to look at a part of this leaf. We're going to look at it underneath the microscope slide, right? Hence this arrow, right? So here we go. We're looking at the leaf under the microscope slide. Look, here's the lower epidermis with your stoma, right? Here's your upper epidermis up here in gray. And all that green stuff in the middle is the mesophyll layer. And the mesophyll layer is green. And the reason the mesophyll layer is green is because, so look, here's one mesophyll cell. And it looks basically a green blob, right? Well, all inside of those mesophyll cells are lots and lots and lots of green blobs, basically. And those green blobs, so this is a single mesophyll cell with lots of green blobs inside of it. And the green blobs inside of it are called chloroplast. And so this is one chloroplast. And inside of the chloroplast are all of these green stacks that are filled with a pigment called chlorophyll. So let me walk you through this. So, and we will, sorry, these things, chloroplast and chlorophyll, and the other structures inside of this chloroplast, we will talk about during the plant physiology lab lecture in a few lectures from now. Oh, another thing I want to point out here is, remember I said that this mesophyll layer is the cell layer that does photosynthesis, right? That's what it says on the slide. And I told you earlier during the little crash course through photosynthesis that in photosynthesis, the plant absorbs CO2 gas, and then chemical reactions occur with the energy of the sun, and the waste product that comes out is oxygen. Well, now you know where the oxygen and the carbon dioxide are going in and out of, and that's those stoma of the stomatal apparatus again. So that's what this is showing you here. Look, CO2 gas is able to go in when the stoma is open, and when the stoma is open, oxygen gas is also able to go out. But we'll learn more about photosynthesis in another lecture. This is just to show you that the anatomy of a leaf can really depend on how much sun it's getting, because Well, the mesophyll layer is the layer that performs photosynthesis. And if you're not getting a lot of sun, you're not going to need to have that much of that layer, I guess is a way to put it. This is just to show you a comparison. This here is a leaf that was, oh, and I should mention that for this slide, the normally green chloroplasts have been stained red. So when you see red here, just picture green. Picture green. And if you have a certain type of color blindness, you might, it might not even matter. That's why it's always tricky to kind of pick colors for these slides. But so here we see a bunch of chloroplasts that are stained red, and this leaf was grown in the full sun. So look at how much mesophyll cells there are, right? Particularly the palisade mesophyll, because look, upper epidermis, so this is the upper side of the leaf. So what I should do is, that tells us that's the side of the leaf that the majority of the sunlight is going to hit, because it's the side of the leaf that's facing the sun. But look at how much mesophyll, particularly palisade mesophyll, there is. And that's because this leaf is in full sun, so it makes a lot of that stuff. Then look at this leaf. This leaf was grown in shade, and look at how little mesophyll there is, and particularly look at the spongy mesophyll. There's almost none, right? Just to give you an idea of how the leaf anatomy can change depending on external conditions. Oh, why am I showing you this again? Oh, yes. This is just to tell you that, so inside of a leaf, I told you there's these chloroplasts, and the chloroplasts contain these, inside of a leaf is mesophyll, and inside of one mesophyll cell is lots and lots of chloroplasts, and inside of a chloroplast is lots and lots of chlorophyll, which is a green pigment. But it's not the only pigment that occurs in leaves. In fact, you can do what's called a liquid chromatography, and basically mush up a leaf with a mortar and pestle so that it turns into kind of like a paste, just like smash it. And then you add a few chemicals, usually like alcohol and a few things like that, and let time pass. And if you do that, you can actually see these other examples of pigments. So the chlorophyll I said is green, right? So here's chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, right? Here's chlorophyll A, here's chlorophyll B. Maybe I should switch colors. This is chlorophyll A that's been separated out. This is chlorophyll B that's been separated out. But you can see there's these other pigments as well. Beta carotene, for example, is kind of an orange color. In fact, I think carrots are high in beta carotene. Isn't that why they're called carrots? I think it is. Hence the orange color of carrots usually. Then you also have these yellowish pigments called xanthophylls. And then there's another one, pheophytin, but I don't know too much about those. But the point is, green is the main pigment in leaves, particularly chlorophyll A and B, but there are also other pigments in leaves. And the time of year where you might notice that the most is during fall, right? During fall. Those different pigments that I was just talking about and others are why different species of trees turn certain colors in the fall. So for example, here, you see chlorophyll on the left with this green leaf, but sometimes other species have more of these other things. And so no matter what, when the chlorophyll when fall happens, and the temperatures are getting cooler and the amount of daylight is less, chlorophyll is the first pigment to kind of go away in leaves. And so once that kind of degrades and goes away, these other pigments become more pronounced. So like if chlorophyll decomposes in this leaf, then the anthocyanins are very noticeable and the leaf will look red, right? Here, the flavonoids are apparent, and there is your carotenoids again, right? Your beta carotene type stuff. Okay, I think, right. We already know this. We already know in the leaf there are veins, and in those veins are xylem and phloem. And we already know that the xylem transports water, and we already know that the phloem transports sugar. And we already know that the water goes from the roots to the leaves, and the phloem, or the sugar goes from the leaves where it's made to the roots, right, and the rest of the plant. One thing, so remember I told you, I'm not going to scroll all the way back, but remember when I told you that dicots have like a net-like venation and monocots have a parallel venation? Well, this venation is also visible at the microscopic level. What does that all mean? It's a lot of big words. It means if you do a cross-section through a dicot leaf and a cross-section through a monocot leaf, you can look at the veins and know whether or not you're looking at a monocot leaf or a dicot leaf. So look here. See on the bottom, it says, the veins of a monocot leaf are all seen in cross-section because they're parallel pattern as above. Whereas on the left, you have the veins of a dicot leaf. Veins can appear in a cross-section or from the side. And you might be looking at this and say, like, I don't see anything but green blobs. Well, here, that's why I do this for you. So each circle, remember the monocot leaves veins kind of look like little faces, right? So look here in the red circles, or the veins of the monocot leaf, and notice that in each of those veins, you see the full little face, because you're seeing the whole vein like this, because the veins in a monocot leaf run parallel. This is something I used to do in the lab when I used to do this, when I used to teach this in lab. Like, okay, think of these as veins, right? Think of these as veins in a leaf. If I have parallel venation, my veins run like that, right? Parallel to each other. And if I were to do a cross section through this leaf and look at it under the microscope slide, I would see all of the veins looking right at me, because they're parallel to one another, right? And that's what's showing you here in the red circles. Each of those red circles, here, there's only 3 there. So each of those red circles is one of these veins coming parallel at you. But if I were to have a dicot leaves don't have parallel veins. Dicot leaves have, like, here, let's use 3 because I'm too difficult. Dicot leaves have non-parallel veins. So if I were to do a cross section through a dicot leaf and look at that under the microscope, oh, I can't even do it. There you go. There. You can't see the whole vein. You can see the whole vein of this one because that one is pointing at you, but the other ones are going off to the side because they're not parallel. So that's what this is trying to show you in the purple circle. So in the purple circle, we can see an entire vein, much like we can see it in here and here and here. But in this rectangle, we don't see the whole circle. We see more like this angle, like the side of a vein. Hence the rectangle, right? It's kind of like the side of the vein. So you can tell if a leaf is a monocot or dicot with the naked eye by looking at the veins, but if you're looking at a microscope specimen, you can also tell if it's a monocot or a dicot because of that. Right, we're finishing up leaves here, and roots won't take as long. So variation on the leaf. Some leaves have evolved and become adapted to store water for plants. So if you've ever had a succulent as I almost said pet plant. If you've ever had a succulent as a house plant, not a pet plant, you might have noticed like very thick, juicy kind of leaves. And that's because those have evolved to store water because they tend to grow in like desert environments where there's no water. So once water becomes available, they hold on to it in the leaves. Some other plants have evolved spines. So the spines are actually a thing on a leaf. And that helps with protection. It makes it so that things don't want to eat that plant. We talked about this a little bit in the STEM lecture where I mentioned onion. So right here on the left is an onion. And in the STEM lecture, I was telling you the stem tissue of an onion is just that little, knob part right at the base. But all the other stuff is actually modified leaves. So when you're eating an onion, you're actually eating leaves, believe it or not. And this is a way that the plant stores food for itself. So there's like lots and lots of, believe it or not, when you eat an onion, there's lots and lots of plant sugars in there. Same with like garlic and other compounds as well. Give it that flavor. But the reason why these plants do this is because they're holding on to food for the following season. So for example, spring bulbs like daffodils and hyacinth, they're called spring bulbs, right? And if any of you are lucky enough that you have a yard, maybe you've planted something like this before, and when you buy them, they look almost like a little garlic or something, right? You plant them in the ground, and then in the spring, they come up and they make the pretty flowers. And the reason they have the energy to do that is because there's food stored in the bulb to power the plant to grow leaves and grow flowers. And then once it grows leaves, it can start making its own food using the sun. Some plants have leaves called bracts. So bracts look like petals. Bracts look like petals. So if you didn't know any better and you were walking through the street and saw plants or walking through some forest and you saw these things, you might think those are flowers because they're so pretty and vibrant, but those are actually types of leaves called bracts. Here's one that most people are familiar with. Around the holidays, you can often buy these poinsettia plants that are red, and sometimes they come in other different colors. Well, the red things on them are leaves, and those leaves are called bracts. Of these examples shown here, this one here is my favorite. This is a bunch of crazy bracts. That plant is that's a bat flower. That's the common name of that plant. So that it looks like a bat, right? And so it's actually pollinated by bats as well. So anyways, bracts are showy. They're leaves, but they're showy, and their job is to attract animals to the plant to help with pollination. Leaf propagules is another example. So leaf propagules, basically the leaf makes on it little things. So like here on this left is a leaf, and this is a little thing, this is a little thing, and those little things are called propagules. And what's cool is each of these little things, they'll eventually fall off of the leaf, and when they do, each one of those can grow into a new full plant. So they like propagate the plant, hence the propagules. Now this is not the result of any sort of sperm and egg, like sexual reproduction. This is more like clones. So the plant's basically making like little clones of itself. And this this specific plant is called like mother. There's a way to call it in Spanish, but I'm not going to do it here because I'm going to post this recording. But mother of 1,000 devils basically is what the common name of this plant. They make awesome plants though, and it's fun because you can give your friends little propagules, and then they can grow one for themselves. And then there's some leaves have evolved to allow plants to live in water, whether it's submerged completely in water, like down here on the bottom. I have a freshwater fish tank where I have growing plants in there. And yeah, so some plants can just be living underwater. Other ones, like the ones shown up here and the ones shown here, will float. But still, it's you have to have different, like for example, if you have stomata on your lower epidermises of these, that's not going to work so well because it's going to be opening into the water, right? So maybe these guys don't really use stomata, they use other stuff. Okay. Here's another, this is a fun one of a leaf variation, right? Insect capturing leaves. So I'm sure that you've at least heard of a Venus flytrap, right? Which is shown here on the top left. But there's other types of insect capturing leaves. For example, pitcher plants, like a pitcher of milk, shown here on the top right and the bottom right. And then on the bottom left here, this little sticky guy is what's called a sundew. And all four of these are examples of insect capturing leaves. And what the reason why these have evolved is because the plants are living in very unique conditions where it's hard for them to get nutrients. And so they've evolved to actually capture and consume insects and other animals in order to make up for the lack of nutrients. And funnily enough, if you buy one of these and you fertilize it with nutrients, eventually the leaves just look like normal leaves. They don't even look like this anymore. Because they're like, why do I need to catch insects? I got fertilizer now. Yeah, just a little fun fact. Okay. Leaves are important. You have to admit, you got to admit it, guys. You can't deny it. You eat leaves. You eat leaves even if you don't know you eat leaves. You eat leaves. Sometimes we know it, but other times it's all just part of our meal, right? These are some examples, right? Collard greens, beet greens, broccoli greens, romaine, lettuce, bok choy, watercress, arugula, Swiss chard, cabbage, right? So we eat leaves. We also use leaves a lot for our seasoning, So all of your favorite herbs, for the most part, are actually from leaves, right? Basil, tarragon, thyme, mint, oregano, parsley, rosemary, sage, fennel, chives, etc. Cilantro. Those are all leaves. So we use leaves a lot in our cooking. And what have I been drinking this whole night? Tea, right? Tea. Well, what's tea made out of? Right? Leaves. So we also use them a lot for our drinks, making teas out of them and other things like that. Some people even drink wheatgrass, right? Which is from a grass, so that's a leaf as well. Okay. That's enough on the leaves for today. Now we're going to go through the roots. The roots won't be as long as the leaves. But if you haven't already, I recommend pausing and taking a break and kind of doing something else for a second, and then coming back to do the roots. But I'm going to keep going because otherwise I'm just going to go to sleep. I'm tired. All right, roots. So here is our representative plant again, right? And we just finished talking about the leaves. Now we're talking about the root system, and the root system is the part of the plant that's usually underground. What do roots do? Well, I think I touched on this last class a bit, but roots anchor the plant to the soil so that they make it so that the plant stays put, right? And you should know, especially for things like trees, usually only about 1/3 of the plant is above ground. And the roots usually make up about 2/3 of the plant. Yeah. Yes, so obviously if you have a plant at your house that's in a pot this big and the plant's like this big, okay, obviously no, the majority of the plant in that case is above ground. But for plants growing out in nature, usually more than half, if not way more than half of the plant is actually underground. So think about that the next time you're walking through a forest. You're only seeing 1/3 of the forest. There's 2/3 of the forest underground you can't even see. So yeah. What do roots do? anchor the plant to the soil, and they absorb water and minerals. This is not rocket science. We know that roots absorb water, right? I'm not going to go into the chemistry of what's all going on here, but just know, like, for example, if you provide fertilizer to your plant, the fertilizer is usually made up of things like this: nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And so those are actually going to be absorbed by the roots. Water goes in from the roots, moves up through the stem, and this in some ways helps push the products of photosynthesis or sugar downwards. This is just a fancy drawing to show things that we've already covered. Don't worry about so much what's going on the left, but this is just another schematic, right? Water and minerals are going up into the plant from the roots. Eventually water is getting released out of the leaves through transpiration. Look, they did a little cross section through a leaf. Here is our leaf cross section: epidermis, mesophyll, vein. And obviously, if this down here is that lower epidermis, there you go. Stomatal apparatus, all stuff we just covered, but this is another way to look at it. And there's more words here in case you're looking at the slides and not rewatching or watching the lecture. Okay. Just like we saw in the leaves, roots also, well, those were special leaves, right? Like an onion, but roots, a lot of roots store food. This is kind of one of their main functions. Sure, some of them are like roots we like to eat, like a carrot or a turnip or a radish. But even in trees, the roots will store food. Actually, we just witnessed it recently with this shift from winter to spring. Because think about plants who had no leaves over the winter, and then spring happens. Well, we learned that leaves make sugar from photosynthesis. So then if it has no leaves, how the heck did the tree make leaves if it has no leaves? Well, what happens is in the fall, when the leaves are kind of starting to go away, the sugars, as they've made sugars over the course of the year, the sugars will get stored in the roots. And then when winter's over, the sugars from the roots will go back up into the plant and allow new leaves to grow. All right, different types of root systems. We're only going to look at two. So this is a seed showing a baby plant emerging, right? Or an embryonic plant emerging from the seed. And the embryonic plant has a baby root, which is called a radicle. Radicle. I feel like I can't say it correctly. Radicle. Not like radical, not like I'm dating myself, but radicle, which is a baby root. And it's the first thing to come, like, what is it? Radical. Yeah. It's the first thing to come out of the seed. There's the radicle right there. As the radicle grows, it will turn into what's called the primary root as it grows. And eventually, you'll have secondary roots which will come off of that primary root. So to show you this in real, I'm going to pause it here. Let me stop the share and let me pause, and I'm going to pull up this video real quick. One sec. All right, I am resumed. Yes, okay, good. Let me share this video. Oh, and I'll share it with sound. No, yeah, I'll share it with sound, but I'm scared it's gonna be too loud. Yeah, all right, so share. Yes, okay, share. All right, so you guys should be able to see this now. Let me make it big, full screen. Hopefully, let me look here. I'm gonna turn this way down because it's just music, but it's still nice. All right, so this is a kidney bean. there is the radicle coming out of the kidney bean. And so now it's gotten old enough where it's kind of the primary root. There you see the secondary roots coming off of the primary root already. Those are all the secondary roots. Pretty cool, right? I love these time lapse. So on the left, on the right, if you watch, you'll see stuff with the shoot system. And you guys can watch these anytime you want. You have the link. But look at the left. Look at the roots growing on the left. Right? So crazy. Right here, this part later, they actually focus just on the root, where they speed it up a little bit more, so you can see it even more dramatically, like how crazy it grows. And so how are these roots growing in length? Right? In length, primary growth, right? You're growing via the apical meristem, right? Okay. Yeah, so you guys could watch, if you want to watch that whole video, you can. You have the link in the PowerPoint slides. Yeah. No, I'm way further than this. Sorry. Yeah. Yep. Good. Just want to make sure. I always get nervous that I'm not sharing the right thing, because if I had to re-record this, it would be a bummer. All right. So we just watched that. You guys can watch the rest of that. That primary root, if the primary root, because this is about root systems, right? Root systems. If the primary root remains functional and prominent, then that plant has what we call a taproot system, because the primary root remains functional and prominent. So an example of a taproot system is a dandelion. If you've ever tried to pull out a dandelion from your yard, or from your parents' yard, or from your aunt's yard, or just for fun in the park, you may have noticed that it's hard. It's hard to get it out of there. And that's because dandelions have this taproot system, and that primary root remains functional and goes down really far into the dirt. If the primary root does not remain functional, the roots will actually just come off of the stem like so. So here's a stem, and the roots just kind of come off of it all however they want, no primary root. We call that a fibrous root system. See here, fibrous root system. So here's two plants, right? Plant A on the left, plant B on the right. What type of root system do you think plant A has? Your choices are taproot system and fibrous root system, right? Well, do you see a primary root on on plant A? Not really, right? Almost looks like a beard or something. How about plant B? So in plant B, we see a very clear primary root with some other roots coming off of it. So plant B has a taproot system, but plant A doesn't have any primary root. It just has lots of roots coming off of the stem. Plant A has a fibrous root system. Okay, root growth and region. So during the video, I was saying, I hope you could hear me over the music, but I was saying that those roots were growing in length, right? And how do they do that? They have to grow in length via primary growth. You can't have primary growth unless you have, an apical meristem, right? Because the apical meristem is going to be the meristem that makes the primary meristems. So here we go. We have an onion or some bulb-like plant right here. And here's its roots. And this little box is showing you that we're going to look at this root tip. And that's what's below that. So in the rectangle, there's a root tip. And that is where your apical meristem is going to be located, at the very tip. So here I'll use not red because the root itself is kind of red. See here, apical meristem, right? So the apical meristem is this. There is a little bit of a sheath that covers it in the root. That's because the apical meristem has to move through soil. And so if it's just naked without any sort of little protection, it could get broken and damaged. So in the root, the apical meristem is covered by like a little hat almost, right? Like this here is like a little hat, kind of covers it. But regardless, this is the apical meristem. We know the apical meristem is going to make the 3 primary meristems. Here they are: procambium, ground meristem, and protoderm, right? And that little hat thing is called a root cap. So here is the root, a little bit more of it. You can see it's still pointing out to you where the apical meristem is, where the procambium is, the ground meristem, and the protoderm are. And there's different zones on a root. So the root apical meristem is located in what's called the zone of cell division. That's where you're going to find the apical meristem and the 3 primary meristems that it makes. So the zone of cell division is like this part of the root. Then you have the zone of elongation. The zone of elongation is just where the cells elongate. So these 3 primary meristems are going to make their primary tissues, right? Protoderm is going to make epidermis. Ground meristem is going to make pith and cortex. Procambium is going to make xylem and phloem. When it makes those things, the cells of those things are going to elongate in this zone of elongation of the root. Oh, let me clear that other thing. Oh, come on. Lastly is this zone called the zone of maturation. The zone of maturation is where root hairs appear. And here is also where those tissues are going to be completely made. So the primary meristems are beginning to make the tissues in that zone of cell division. Those cells are becoming ready in that zone of elongation. And by the time you get to the zone of maturation, everything is mature. And so you'll have regular epidermis, cortex, things like that. But root hairs are important. Root hairs are part of the epidermis. Oh, and this is just showing you the exact same thing in a different slide. So this shows you this. It might be a little clearer. This is from your book. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Root hairs are important. Root hairs are part of the epidermis. And what they do is they allow the surface of the epidermis to be larger. So like you can think of it this way. I'll use red. Here is let's say this is an epidermal cell. It may not be in this slide. It might be called something else, but don't worry about that. Let's say this is on the epidermis of a root. That doesn't, let's say it ends right here. That doesn't have all that much surface area to absorb water, right? Like if here, I'll use a different color. Look, here's water. Here's water. I'm trying to draw drops, right? Unsuccessfully. This is not that much surface area to absorb water. But if you have a root hair, so here's another epidermal cell. However, this one has this long root hair coming off of it. Whoa, look at how much surface area you have to absorb water now, right? All over this whole thing. So that's what root hairs do. They help plants access more of the soil and therefore absorb water. So root hairs is what absorbs the actual water. Here on the left, you see root hairs coming off of this primary root. And then on the right, you can see the root hairs are part of the epidermal cells. Some of them have root hairs, some of them don't have root hairs. Okay, dicot versus monocot roots. Just like stems and just like leaves, you can also tell whether something's a dicot or a monocot by looking at the roots. So think back to the stem, which seems like a long time ago already, but if you think back to the stem, in dicot stems, the vascular tissue is arranged in a ring in dicot stems. Well, now in dicot roots, they are not. In dicot roots, the vascular tissue is centrally located. Only it's just one of them and it's right in the middle. So what do I say here? Dicots, vascular cylinder centralized, right? So in the stem, dicots, vascular tissue is arranged in a ring. In a root, vascular tissue in dicots in a root is centralized. So here it is. This is a dicot root vascular bundle in a root. In monocot stems, the vascular tissue was not in a ring. It was scattered. And that's when I showed you those little faces, right? Right? Those little faces. So that was in a monocot stem. In monocot root, it's basically this whole thing is the vascular cylinder. And to be fair, in a monocot root, it kind of looks like arranged in a ring. So one way that could help you to remember what I'm saying is you can draw little, I always forget, can you guys see over here? You must be able to, if I can see it. Let's try. If you can't see what I'm drawing, I'll know for next time. But you might want to draw little diagrams. So like you could do, let's do, this will be dicot up here, and this will be monocot down here. Dicot stem, dicot root, monocot stem, monocot root. We'll use a different color for vascular tissue. Dicot stem, vascular tissue in a ring. Dicot root, central location of just one, right? That's this here. Monocot stem, not arranged in a ring. Oh, that's not supposed to, that wasn't supposed to be a face. Not arranged in a ring, all scattered. Monocot stem. Monocot root kind of looks like a ring, right? So this is ways to help you memorize things like this. Okay. This is just a close-up of vascular tissue of the dicot root. So this is the one that I was drawing like this. It's actually here, it's like kind of like this. Dicot root. And there's a close-up of it here. And just trying to show you like that's where your primary xylem and primary phloem are, right? This stuff is actually the primary xylem. And all the stuff around it, all this stuff is the primary phloem, etc. Dicot root. This is just a close-up of that again. Monocot root, right? Kind of looks like a ring. Yeah, and the different parts of it there. But I'm more concerned of you being able to distinguish dicot versus monocot stem, dicot versus monocot leaf, dicot versus monocot root. That's what I want you to remember. All right, we're almost done. We're almost done. Just going to talk a little bit about variation of roots. Top root or adventitious roots. These are roots that are usually visible above the soil, and they usually serve more to support the plant and help the plant not fall over. And then there'll be other roots that go into the soil that really absorb more water. So in these slides, on this tree here, all of these things coming off are these prop roots or adventitious roots. On the left here, this is actually corn, believe it or not. Corn makes these adventitious roots as well, and they eventually will grow down into the dirt to help prevent the corn from falling over. It's one type of variation on a root. Some roots allow plants to climb. So if you live in any like Journal Square or New York City or Newark or any place with lots of buildings, you most likely have seen ivy growing on the walls. The way that ivy is able to do that is because their roots have these little kind of fingers almost. You can kind of see them on the bottom here. This is one root, and it's got these kind of little protrusions coming off of it, and those little protrusions are really good at kind of getting into the tiny crevices of bricks. And so that's why you tend to see that. So these are also, these were adventitious roots, they're crop roots. These are adventitious roots that are adventitious roots that are climbing roots. The word adventitious just means roots that come off the stem. Roots that come off the stem. So in the case of the ivy, the roots that come off the stem help the plant climb. In the case of the corn, the roots that come off the stem prop it up and provide it support. These we already talked about, right? Food storage roots. Some plants have what are known as aerial roots to allow them to live in kind of different environments. So for example, on the left here, we see mangrove plant, mangrove tree. And the roots are aerial roots because if they weren't aerial roots, they would be submerged by water all the time. And believe it or not, roots also need oxygen. They can't just have water, they have to have oxygen as well, which is why your plant, like if you overwater your house plant, you prevent oxygen from getting into the roots, and then the roots die, and then you have root rot, and then your plant dies and you feel bad. And yeah, if you ever have questions about what's going on with your house plants, take photos and send them to me. I'll try my best to help you guys out with that. But yeah, aerial roots help plants live in these environments. In the case of the mangrove, it allows the plant to get oxygen in the roots because there won't be underwater. In the case of the orchids, shown on the right, orchids sometimes live on other plants, like on trees and stuff. And so their roots will be in the air as well, protected by another layer that we don't need to know about. Oh, I guess when you're an orchid and your roots are just in the air, your roots are usually covered by this kind of waxy thing. That waxy thing is called velamen. So if you've ever bought an orchid at your grocery store or at Home Depot, and you saw the roots looked very white and almost fake, that's because they're coated with this substance called velamen that the roots make to protect them from drying out. Some roots have these little nodules, these little things that house bacteria, and the bacteria that live inside of those little knobs help the plants acquire nitrogen. And this can be like a relationship where There's bacteria that live. So basically the plant's like growing apartments for bacteria. That's how you can think of it. Like each of these little things, this is like, you know, floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, whatever. These are like little apartments basically for bacteria. And why would a plant do that? Because it's a symbiotic relationship. They'll help each other out. So here's the little apartments that the plant makes called root nodules. Inside of that, bacteria will live. The bacteria, here's one, the bacterium will take nitrogen from the air and do stuff to it and make it into a form of nitrogen that the plants can use. Because plants can't take nitrogen from the air, but the bacteria can. And as it's like, you know, scratch my back, I scratch your back, the bacterium provides nitrogen compounds to the plant, and in return, the plant provides sugars to the bacteria. This is an example of a symbiotic relationship, which is cool. Just like there were aquatic leaves, there's aquatic roots that allow plants to live in water environments. This is another example of a symbiotic relationship where a certain kind of fungus, which is called mycorrhizal fungus, will enter roots and kind of allow plant. I don't know if you guys ever saw Avatar, like the movie Avatar. Remember how like all the roots, if you didn't see it, this isn't a spoiler, but like the roots of the trees in Avatar were like connected, right? Well, in real life, this happens. The roots of lots of different plants, let's say, for example, in a forest, are all connected by fungus. And the fungus allows the plants to access more water from soil. And the fungus actually allows plants sometimes to share carbon in this case, but like sugars, back and forth across the fungus. Yeah, it's cool. So I don't need you to know all how this works, but on the left, you see a root. I'll use black. This here is, look, they did a cross section through a root. B is showing you cross section through the root. All those little like wiggly worms are supposed to be showing you fungus. And basically what happens is the fungus is able to enter into the root. So it's like it connects it to the soil almost. And this is really cool. This is really cool because then look, like you can actually have plants. When you're walking through a forest and you see mushrooms and stuff, you're only seeing the fruiting bodies of the mushrooms. In the soil, there's this whole network of fungus that's connecting all the plants to each other. And so they can access water that they wouldn't have been able to. They can transport sugar to each other. Yeah, it's cool. Okay. Yay. I'm running out of voice. All right, so that means we're officially 37.5% done with all of the material for this course. Because this is the end of lecture 3, and there's only 8 lectures. So there is a homework quiz available on Canvas. It's due by Friday by midnight, right? 11:59 p.m. For the assignments that are every time on Wednesday when we have a class, the quiz will be due Friday before midnight. Every time we have Monday and we have a homework quiz, that homework quiz will be due before class on Wednesday, right? So Monday quizzes will be due on Wednesday by 6. Wednesday quizzes will be due by Friday by midnight, okay? Just to give you guys a little extra buffer of time. Funner class, but long. I'm tired. So next class, we will get into flowers, fruits, and seeds. And with that, hope you guys all have a great night, and I'll see you next time. Bye.